this is my question for you this hour. Do you feel comfortable bringing your full, real self to work? Just tuck that away. I feel like sometimes we have to take jobs where we can't bring our full, real selves, and I have been there, and not only is it hard, but sometimes it feels demoralizing. And then, in hindsight, I realized that those jobs are actually great because they push us to find the jobs or the career paths that really allow us to bring our real selves. And not just allow us, but celebrate it and value it. So the 3 panelists that we have here today know that feeling of being stuck. And they have all successfully monetized their realness. So please give it up for Keely Cat Wells, Imani Ellis, and Nana Agyemang. Woo! We have 3 real girls today. I love it. Awesome. So, Nana, I want to start with you because I feel like so many people in this room are starting out in their careers or starting over. And I'm wondering what a piece of advice is that you would give someone who's just entering that first space.
Yeah, so something I saw on Instagram was the word loud work. Does anyone know what that is? Raise your hand if you've heard of it before. Okay, so you're like me. So pretty much loud work is where every month you just write down all your accomplishments from work. This could be personal goals, this could be company goals, but it's everything that you're excited about, you succeeded in, you were nervous, but you accomplished. And I think that's helpful because when you're ready to leave that job or you're ready to ask for a promotion or when you want to make a pivot, you have the receipts, right? And I think receipts keep you accountable and they hold so much weight. So I really think just documentation is so important. And that's something like when you're first starting in your career, you feel overwhelmed with the job. You're like, okay, I'm here. I just need to make it through the first day, right? The first week, the first month. But really making sure to like pride yourself. Be like, I did accomplish this in the first month, right? Like I did build this website. I did do this research. So I would definitely say loud work is something like, it's my new word. I even want to still incorporate it as an entrepreneur. But for sure, like making that list and jotting down your accomplishments for the month.
I read that you said if you want something, go get it. I love that. Feels really empowering. If you want it, go get it. Why do you think that self-advocacy is so important at work?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I advocated so hard for myself that I actually got fired. So
I'm sorry, what?
yeah, but hold on. This is good because there was a better opportunity for me. So when I was working at Refinery 29, I did not see eye to eye with my boss. We would butt heads all the time, which is crazy because we went to the same school and we were in the same journalism program. So when I got hired, I was like, oh my God, she's gonna be my biggest advocate. Like, yes, we're besties. But I didn't realize I was low-key a competitor to her, which is strange because you think similar backgrounds, we're gonna uplift one another, but that wasn't the energy that I received. And so I would constantly advocate for myself. When she would tell me to write about certain things, I said, well, this wouldn't appeal to my demographic, right? Or I don't think this would be a voice for my community. And she ended up saying, like, I'm constantly disagreeing with her, I'm pushing back. And I was like, no, I'm just advocating for my community and for myself. And then when there were big company layoffs, they had said, oh, we're just sizing down. But no, like I knew it was like a targeted thing. But due to her firing me, right after that, I was able to cover the Met Gala multiple times on the red carpet. So I was like, great. So yes to being fired, period.
Keely, you're a serial entrepreneur, and I interview entrepreneurs a lot. I know that for every high we see on Instagram, there's like 5 or 10 lows. It is really hard. And I think most people don't jump into entrepreneurship right out of school. So for anyone who's starting out here at a large corporation or even a small corporation, and they're still wanting to find their purpose within that job, what would you say to them?
I would say start with your own story. For me, my purpose kind of came out of necessity. So I became disabled when I was 17, and then when I moved to LA, I ended up losing a job due to disability discrimination. So I founded my first company. And I didn't realize at the time that I was starting a company. I just was so frustrated with the A, lack of disability representation within film, TV, and media, and also B, what had happened to me. I didn't think it was right, and I knew that it was probably happening to other people. So I found a group of amazing, talented, disabled people within entertainment, and one by one, I just started helping them get jobs. And then that's what a talent agent does. So it turned into a talent agency. But I would say start with one thing. Have big goals, have big dreams, but start just one by one and start small, and eventually it will grow. And we ended up placing hundreds of disabled people into thousands of roles. And thank you. Thank you.
Imani, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this because you started at Bravo, and then you built your own company, then you built another company. So back in the day, the advice was stay at one job and stay there for a long time. And now, kind of the rule of thumb is that it's best to job hop. What do you think about that?
You know, it's interesting because when I did start off at Bravo, I thought I had found my dream job, and I was right. I loved it. I loved Andy Cohen. I loved all the housewives. And time went by, and my friends who had started at different roles, they were jumping all around, and I was staying. And what I really like to say is you have to go where the light is. What I mean when I say go where the light is, it's are you being challenged? Are you learning? And is there mentorship there? And for me, I was where the light was. And so I ended up staying at Bravo for 10 years because I had a boss who believed in me, and she would pull me up. So every time she got promoted, she was very transparent. Imani, these are the things I need you to work on so I can pull you up with me. And so if you're in a situation where someone is pouring into you and helping you and giving you the blueprint, I don't know if I could just jump somewhere else and find that. That's a really big risk. So it's a lot like dating. You gotta follow your heart because what works for your friend might not necessarily work out for you.
Keely, you were a 2021 Aerie Real Changemaker.
I was.
Very cool. The Aerie team continues to invest in women-owned businesses and organizations, and the Aerie Real Foundation has now awarded over 100 grants to support national and nonprofit organizations. And I interviewed somebody one time that said entrepreneurship is like the Resilience Olympics. I think that's true. What happens when you have a down moment? When you're bummed, when things don't go well, what do you do?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard, and it feels like such a big roller coaster. And I will say the Aerie grant was, it truly changed the trajectory for me. I think it's a real privilege to be able to find purpose, too, in the work that we do. I don't think everyone has that opportunity. And the grant gave us the resources that we needed to really be able to build the team and really have an opportunity to truly succeed. But I would say, I mean, there's always going to be down moments. Definitely find your community, find your people. I would say, actually, for me, it was the disabled community. For a very long time, I was really embarrassed of being disabled, and I thought I was going to have one life, and then at the age of 17, life just completely changed. But I recognized and realized, because of the community that I was surrounded by, that that was okay, and that there are always going to be people to lift you up when you need them, and you do the same to them. So definitely finding your community and the people that resonate with you and also identify with you as well. And you can also then feel confident and okay to share things that you may have been embarrassed to share before.
Thanks for sharing that. This is something I want to ask all of you, but imposter syndrome comes up in my friend group, in my professional life, more than anything else. I'm seeing a lot of people nod their heads. It's a big thing for women in particular. Do you feel it at all? And if so, what do you think about it? How do you think about it? And how do you get over it? Imani, will you start?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Imposter syndrome, I thought, oh, I'll make it to a certain place and then I won't feel it anymore. And I think the irony is that it's always with you, but for me, it reminds me that I'm doing something that I really care about. and that the stakes are high. And so I have made it a part of the process. I always recommend this book. It's called The War of Art, and it's incredible because basically the formula that it talks about is we come up to this thing that's very, very hard. We're very excited. It's a new idea, or maybe we want to be promoted or a side hustle. But then what comes next is something called resistance, which is, you can't do this. Why would you do this? No one cares that you do this. And if you can overcome resistance, then you can really excel. And so for me, I've really thought of it as a formula. First, I get excited, then comes the resistance. And because I know it's coming, I gotta do my best to try to go through it. And my dad always says the only way out is through. So think of your life as a Wikipedia page. And in Wikipedia, you're born, but you can't just stop there. You gotta keep going to complete your story. And so it's hard now, but it won't last forever.
That is one of the best answers I've heard. I love that. You just got to keep going. It's part of it.
It's part of it.
And noticing it.
Yeah, and it refines you. So it's like we wish it wouldn't happen, right? And I did track, and I remember my coach used to say, it's conditioning season. And we would all go like, oh my gosh. Because conditioning meant we had to run up and down, but it's like without conditioning season, you can't win state. You need them both. Yeah.
Got to get through it.
You got to get through it.
Nana, how do you think about it?
So I'm gonna have an opposite answer, and I love that answer so much, but personally, I never allowed imposter syndrome into my life. I always said, like, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't meant to be here. I wouldn't have been hired if they didn't see a light in me. I wouldn't have been on this stage if Aerie didn't see a light in me, right? So I always say, like, affirm what you have, take it in, like understand, like you are in this role for a reason. You are in this room for a reason. You're gonna meet someone in this room for a reason. You might start a business with someone in this room. You can make a new friend in this room. So I always just accepted it. I'm like, why would I be presented this opportunity if I wasn't gonna crush it, right? And I actually remember when I got my job at New York Magazine, 3 months in was the Met Gala, and I was like, I've never done a major red carpet. And I was so nervous, and I was like, why would the editor-in-chief put me in this position? Like, it's like my second job ever in life. But you know what? I'll never forget, like, I went viral for telling Frank Ocean he was so cute. And Frank Ocean—
I remember that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and as you guys know, Frank Ocean doesn't respond. He's like very mute. So like, he doesn't even take interviews. I don't think he's had an interview in years. He turned and winked, and that was enough for me. I said, listen, y'all recorded that? So I ended up getting on like all the Frank Ocean meme pages, and I think that goes to show like, this was only I could have gotten that opportunity, right? So you guys have to remember, like, only you can create that narrative and that story for yourself, and you're in this role, you're in this room for a reason, so just own it.
What I took from that is if you feel imposter syndrome, just think of Frank Ocean winking at you.
There you
and
go.
understand what it means. Keely, tell me about you.
Oh my gosh, so I feel like, and we're probably all in the same boat here, we've been in rooms where we're maybe a little bit out of our depth, but I have a specific story that comes to mind, and I definitely felt like an imposter, but it doesn't help when the people around you also make you feel like an imposter. So I was selling my company, and I got invited to the company that was potentially going to buy the company. And when I walked in, someone said, oh, can you go and grab me a coffee? And they thought I was an intern. And I was selling my company to this company. So it was an interesting moment. And those times definitely do not help. But I think you can also use them to your advantage. And it was, I've had many of those moments where you get to really know the real story about people and those companies.
I heard somebody say the other day that imposter syndrome happens when you're underrepresented in your context. So it took the pressure off of me a little bit, because it's like, that's why women feel it so much. That's why women of color feel it, because we're all underrepresented in our context, you know? Okay, Imani, I read that almost 50% of Americans today have a side hustle. That's a lot. Do you guys have a side hustle? You do? Yeah. You leaped. What is the sign to take your side hustle full time?
Ooh, so I've got two different sides of the coin for this. The first is going back to are you inspired? Do you have mentorship? Are you being challenged? I had been at my company for 10 years. It was a third of my life, and I was like, I think I have learned as much as I can learn. I have put out so many fires for housewives. I don't know if any are new under the sun. I love it here, but I think I've done them all. And so what happened was Creative Collective, which started 10 people in my living room and then grew to this community, it would not stop growing. And I kind of was looking at it like, stop growing. But it was growing and taking up so much space and taking up so much time. And so much of my attention was like, I think my purpose is actually in something that I was doing for fun. And so I'll never forget when the first company came and said, can we sponsor your conference? And I was like, sure. What does that mean? Yeah, sure. And they were like, okay, well, send us a deck. I had no deck. And what was happening was it was opening doors that I hadn't even dreamt of. And so my dad said, listen, you got to reverse engineer it. So what you're going to do is do your job very, very well, but also start, making a work back plan for when you can leave, because being stressed because of money stress is a different kind of stress. You make decisions out of desperation, and I didn't want to do that. And so I started saving, and for me, I saved 5 months of my rent, which meant I had to say no to brunch on the weekends, but saved my little coins, and I set a date. And I had to set a date, and I had to tell my friends, because when we don't have accountability partners, what do? We're like, I'm just gonna kick this can down the road. And so finally, it was just time to make the leap, and I was so scared of what it would look like on the other side, but it's glorious. It's fantastic. And so what I say to anyone who wants to make the leap is, you don't have to make the leap. You can go from something to something if you really start to plan.
Your dad sounds so wise.
He's so wise.
Nana, I want to ask you this. I want to spend a moment discussing hustle or girl boss culture, RIP. I'm seeing a lot of younger people disconnect their worth from their job in a great way. Do you think that narrative about work-life balance is changing?
Yeah, and I also feel like your work doesn't define you. I think sometimes I would work so hard and I would never get seen for it, right? Like I would never get praised for it at work. And I think oftentimes I was overlooked because I was young, but a woman of color. So I never think that you should say, hey, I got this accomplishment at work, this is my worth, like this is what's tied to, because you're not always gonna get that praise. I definitely think due to the pandemic, we all took like 50 steps back and we're like, I think I'm gonna bake some bread and not get on that Zoom call, right? Like, I think I'm gonna like take a break. I think I'm gonna go for a walk, right? And I think this was so many things we weren't doing before. We really had to reprioritize our lives. We had to say like, this company, listen, y'all don't own these companies. Well, maybe some of you do, but like for a lot of us like me, or a lot of younger people in here, like, I was working for someone else's company. I was helping them build a dynasty, build a success, and that wasn't me, right? So I made sure to take time back and build myself, and I think that's what the pandemic made so many people realize is like, we were hustling a little too hard. We were girl bossing a little too much, right? And for who? Like, who was that really for, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's not for your own business, then why, right? And I do think that if you decide to stay at a corporation, it's amazing, but always realize like, okay, what I'm doing here, make sure that it's skills that I can take for myself. I can learn to connections that I can have to be able to, one, build myself, build my future. So yeah, I think the pandemic made everyone realize like, we're gonna put a pause on girl boss and we're gonna focus on building our own selves, right? So yeah, I think that was like a blessing in disguise for so many people in the world. And now what is it? I think it's like 50% of people wanna work remote and the rest wanna be hybrid. Like no one wants to go into the office as much anymore because I think we're all just reprioritizing what our passions were and like what we were pursuing, and we want to focus on ourselves now, which I love, like selfish us. Like I love that for us,
Keely, how about you? I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur. You're now running your own company. I see you. She was at Nassau yesterday. She's running around the country. Do you have any self-care that you bake in, or is it sort of the Wild West for you right now?
Oh my gosh, I wish I was better at self-care, but I have to be. So as someone with a chronic illness, I am very good at managing, well, that's a lie. I should be very good at managing my energy and what we call spoons, which is how we measure energy within the chronic illness community. And I think actually the work from home aspect was huge for me. So disabled people for decades have been asking to work from home as a simple accommodation, but it was only when non-disabled people and the global pandemic happened that we got that granted. And we actually saw a spike in employment of disabled people during the pandemic. And unfortunately, that's going down now because of the coming back to office orders. But for me, definitely prioritizing and always requesting remote is really important. And I'm not a big believer in hustle culture. I think that it's really detrimental to our health, and it's also just not inclusive for the disabled community. Even when I moved to LA, I noticed this constant prioritization of stamina over talent. And it's so detrimental. It's not helpful. Our skills are in no way correlated to the amount of time we can run or the amount of weight we can lift or if we can drive a car. So I'm really excited about the future and also the young people building side hustles and businesses and creating new systems where we can bring in truly all of the talent to really succeed.
I am too. I see you both nodding your head.
Yeah, I love that.
Imani, there was this really beautiful article that just came out about you last month, and it said Imani Ellis had a coveted job working in communications at Bravo, but what she really wanted was community. As an entrepreneur who connects so many through networking, CultureCon is so much about networking too. What do you think the power of a mentor is?
Mentorship really can change your life. And I really think having people who have gone before you, even if it isn't your exact kind of industry, it can just help you skip and leapfrog over all of the different mistakes that they've made. For me, when I think about mentorship, I think about a buffet of mentors. And so I have about 10 different mentors in different categories. And what I'll say if you're looking for a mentor is mentors usually find you when you're doing great work. I think a lot of times people will come up to me and they're like, can you just be my mentor? And I'm like, well, what's your name? And where are you from? And do you like chicken fingers? Like, there's a lot of things we need to discuss first. And what I found is when you really kind of are focusing on doing the best work that you can do, but also having your antennas up for people that you admire, they're so willing to be your mentor. So I think when you're trying to find a mentor, even when you're trying to connect, you want to start with kind of personality first, interest first, being inspired first. And it's, again, I can say a lot of things are like dating. This is like dating too, because my mind works through metaphors, but you really want to find someone where you're contributing and they're contributing. So a lot of my mentors, I was really helping them with like my ear to the ground. Like, did you know about this? Or have you heard about this? And they were helping me kind of future-proof my career. And they also could see in me things that I couldn't see in myself. So it was my mentor who said, Imani, when it's time for your end-of-year review, come with your receipts, and I want you to say as one of your goals, I'd love to be promoted to manager. And I said, Julia, say those words, like say that. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, but I'm working hard. And she's like, no, I want you to say it. So it's mentors that can really kind of help you to that next level.
Keely, what do you think? How do you find a mentor? And has mentorship played a role in your life?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I find mentorship in every single person that I meet. There is always something you can learn from someone. You don't have to take everything they say. You can just pick and choose the bits that work for you. And I think social capital is some of the most important capital you will ever get in your career. So everyone here should absolutely connect with each other on LinkedIn, go through their connections, see who you may want to be introduced to from the people that they're already connected with, and ask. Don't be afraid to ask. But I do think some people go on this kind of lifelong journey of finding the right mentor, and I think that's not necessarily the best way to do it. Maybe it may work for some people, but definitely just look for the things that work for you in everyone that you meet.
How do you guys feel about virtual mentors, like books, YouTube videos?
Yeah, I was gonna say digital mentorship is key, right? Like, and what this means is you don't even have to know the person, right? It could be just reading all of Imani's articles online. There's so much information to absorb in that, right? Like, really, because then you kind of see, okay, these were the steps that she took. This was her journey. So I think so much of the time, even I was like this. I was lazy, so I would just get excited and
I don't know if
see
I believe
someone.
that. You don't
No,
seem
no,
lazy.
no. I would see someone and be like, "Oh my God, like tell me about yourself, this and this." But I was like, "Wait, there's so much information out there online. If you follow them, a lot of these people are very transparent and they share how they built their companies, how they established it." So I think like if you might not live in the same state as the person, you might not have certain access because maybe like they're Jackie Aina and they're not checking their DMs. Well, she said her DMs are closed, so maybe she's not even seeing your DMs. I think there's so much information, right? She's been doing videos for 10 plus years that you can go back there and watch, and that can inspire you and motivate you. And then you can tell people, Jackie is my mentor. She's my digital mentor, right? Like, but still, like, she's your mentor in your head. So I think, like, that's such a powerful tool, and I think more people should utilize it.
I agree. You created Sip and Slay, which I looked online. They look like so much fun. I'm trying to get an invite. And
August 17, we gonna link. We gonna
Thank
link.
you. But they look really fun and vibrant, and a lot of it is about making connections while you're there. Why did you want to infuse joy into making connections?
Yeah, networking is so intimidating. Like, it's extremely intimidating. So for us, we kind of break those barriers. We make it first like a place where you come and you show out. So like the looks are insane. Like everyone's dressing to the T. We had, as you guys can see, Jackie is a phenomenal dresser, right? So we've had her speak, and she was at our last summit. And it really allows women to, one, already feel confident because they're showing up in their best attire. So then what is our best way of networking for women? What do you think I'm going to say?
I feel like we're good at giving props to our friends.
Yes. And then also when we meet people, what do we say? We're like, girl, your shoes are fire.
That's a good
And then
point.
we're like, wait, what's your name? Wait, where are you from? And then it starts like, and that's how networking genuinely starts.
You're
like
right.
we compliment each other, right? Like I think even back there we were talking like, oh my God, this and this. Like, did you work here? And so I think for us, our community is so powerful because yes, networking is intimidating, but we love giving each other compliments. And that's what we do at Sip and Slay, right? We start with that first compliment of like, I love your outfit. But can we be besties? You know what I mean? Like, Can we talk about business and entrepreneurship?
Okay, before we turn it to everybody in the audience, a quick yes or no. Do you feel like you bring your full self to work now? Your realist self?
Well, yes, because I own this company, so yeah, I do.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that same thing, 100%, because I work for myself, right?
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. But I do feel like in different spaces and in different rooms, you kind of have to change up your language sometimes, and sometimes that can feel like it's not your full self. Like recently we've been raising capital, and in like venture capitalist meetings, I can't be like my full self, but I have to just say the things that I know that they're going to want to hear. So you just have to kind of be clever about it. But yeah, definitely the majority of the time.
How about you guys? Can you give me a raise of hands? Who feels like their full self at work? Okay, that's better than I thought, actually. That's not terrible. But I want to turn it over to you. Do you guys have questions for these three amazing leaders?
Hi, my name is Sierra. I'm currently working as like an administrator at a small school, but I love my job. I love being there. The company's so supportive. Like I went through medical things and they were just like, you go heal, you do what you need to do. And I came back and it was amazing. But I've found that I just am not passionate there anymore. And I'm just wondering, how do you navigate being in such a committed and supportive work relationship, but it's not something that your heart is in? How do you navigate finding something new?
That's such a good question. I think for me, I really had to renegotiate my life as a whole. And so I think there is a lot of pressure that your work should give you all of your purpose. But I think our lives have purpose, right, as a whole. And so if you have a very supportive job and a very supportive community, and you're like, but I like it, and you just said, I love my job, it might mean that purpose maybe comes with the way that you interact with your friends or your family or your extracurriculars or your hobbies. And so I would just zoom out and think about, as my life as a whole, am I happy in this life? And if I love my job, maybe the purpose is that I'm happy in this life and I can show up as my full self everywhere else, because I think it puts a lot of pressure on your work to be like, this has to pay my bills and give me purpose and make me happy. So it sounds like you're where you want to be, and so maybe look at the different audits of other places and find where you can inject purpose there.
You're such an active listener.
Well, I worked in communications for 10 years, so I know my boyfriend hates it, but yes.
I think it's a good thing. Who else has a question? I see one in back. Sorry for the pause. We're getting you the mic.
Hi, ladies. So my question, I'm Jakia. I am a hairstylist and barber here in Atlanta. So I do feel like my authentic 100% self. But my question to you ladies who all own your own businesses, when it comes to negotiating or renegotiating, as far as like rates or your worth or your ticket, how do you manage that space while also being respectful? Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I love that question because someone who is a content creator as well, and I don't have an agency, I don't have a manager, I handle all my negotiations, all my brand deals. It's intimidating, right? Because you're oftentimes talking to the legal team, right? You're going back and forth. And so one thing that I found that was really helpful in like not knowing what to set my rate as when I first started is I used to give a range. And what I realized is like when you give a range, that allows people to be like, oh, they're flexible, they're open, but you give a range of like your higher numbers. So they still feel like you're being mindful, but you're still winning at the end of the day, because if they just pick a number within that range, it's still a number you would have wanted, right? So I think sometimes when you're negotiating, let the other person feel like they're winning something, but really you have the upper hand. And that's something that's kind of led me through like all my contract negotiations for the past 3 years by myself. I think I've done pretty successfully to get me to this point. So yeah, for sure, I think you should like create some parameters and some tactics that you can always do and kind of depend on. And also don't be afraid for change. Like I've redid my deck in the past month like 4 times. And I've literally had to tell companies, well, we have an updated deck. Those numbers are different now, if that's okay with you. Don't be afraid, because I think at the end of the day, the worst is a no. But so many people are like, oh, let me see how the numbers are different, right? Let me see what else the package can offer I didn't see before.
Okay.
I love this question as well, and I love that advice. I think 2 things that have helped me. One is I think we tend to see the same other people in our space as competition, but this is the perfect opportunity to speak to people within the same industry as you and within kind of the same size company as you, and ask them what they're doing, what they're working for, and just compare notes, because supporting each other is only helpful and only beneficial, and you can all choose to increase your rates. Yeah. And then the other thing is, as much as you can, try and get someone else to negotiate on behalf of you, even if that is you creating another email address.
Yes, I've seen that a lot. I love it.
How many people have had a fake assistant up here?
It works. It definitely works. Highly recommend.
I love it.
Oh, and all that to say, too, as well, like when we think about the wealthiest people in America, they're white men. And this woman told me, she was like, you'd be surprised. A lot of these white men are sharing information with one another. It's peer-to-peer networking and support and transparency. And so I think one thing that I specifically want to see with more women of color is transparency. Like, we need to help each other win so we can be power players in our industry as well.
Well said. Okay, we have lots of questions. I'm going to get up and do one, if that's okay. I need to stretch my legs. You have a question? All right, you're a short walk. I like it.
Stand right. Oh, sorry. Okay, my question is, apologies to the men in here. I know there's some here. However, I live with a man, so anyways. How do you guys deal with working with men and I guess sometimes the misunderstandings you can have when you either are showing up as your full self or proving your worth every day, every month, yearly reviews, so on and so forth?
Who wants to take that one?
Ooh, child. Well, okay, it's not one size fits all. I'll say when I was in corporate, and I was at Bravo, I worked with a lot of women. I didn't realize how many women I got to work with, but then we had to work interdepartmentally with different men. And I really, if I'm gonna be honest, I had to like woosah before the calls, right? Because I would come onto the calls, there'd be mansplaining, there'd be just, and what I had to realize, this is what will really help you. You should watch Succession, Billions, a lot of these shows because what you really have to do is, I had to tone down my emotional attachment to it, and I had to rise to the cadence that they were speaking. And so I couldn't let the inflection happen. So what I would do is, if they said something, I'm not interrupting them, let them finish, and then I would take a beat, and I would meet them with the same energy. And it felt a little awkward, because I'm like, oh God, like but respect, a lot of times when it did come to those situations, I had to earn it, and they would respect me. And so if they get on a call and they'd be like, well, like we previously said, and da-da-da-da-da, I'd be like, Bob, and yes, his name was Bob. His name was Bob. I said, Bob, I kind of went through this in my email. I'm happy to resend it again, but ... And for a second, you feel awkward, but don't let it intimidate you. Like Nana said, we deserve to be here, we're qualified to be here, and I'm running this meeting, so sit down, Bob.
So good. Okay, someone on this side. I have no hands on this side. I love it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amisha. I'm a professional fundraiser, and during the 20-plus years of my career, I have been an independent contractor, consultant, and then also worked for nonprofits. It wasn't until 2020, during the pandemic, with the civil unrest, the political unrest, and the COVID pandemic, that I thought the world was ending, literally, and I started showing up as my authentic self with my clients. And they started saying, oh my God, Amisha, we didn't know you were so funny. Oh my God, please act like this at every board meeting. And it was such a refreshing thing for me to actually come to a place and be my authentic self. Now I work for another nonprofit again, and that was a deciding factor for me when I chose my job. Will I be able to show up in my workplace as my energetic, bubbly, authentic, but smart self? And my question for the panel is, you all work for yourselves, and you can show up in your full authenticity because you work for yourself. For people who don't, what type of courage does it take? What do you have to overcome? What are the negatives of showing up as your full authentic self with your brilliance, your beauty, your resilience, your skills, your talents, your God-given gifts in a workplace?
She's an amazing speaker.
Yes.
Great question, too. Who wants to take this one first? Nana, I see you.
I mean, for me, just working in a predominantly white media space, that was so challenging, right? Like, I was code switching like anyone else in here has probably code switched before, right? Like when you're talking to certain demographics, certain people that are not from your community or certain background, I felt like I always had to downplay myself. So I would say those were like the most difficult parts. And when I did, once I showed up as my most authentic self, they told me I was being aggressive. And I was like, I'm literally just talking like this. And to them, they were like, you're aggressive right now. Like, that's the energy I'm getting. So I struggled with it. I really struggled with it for some time. But then I started to remember, like, once again, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a certain reason, right? I wouldn't be in this room if it wasn't for a certain reason. So I would do words of affirmation to myself every day before I went into the office. I would validate myself. I would remind myself why I'm here, why the work I'm doing matters to as well, the community, the people that I'm touching who are reading this article or reading this information online. But it's 100% challenging because, and a lot of corporations too as well, like people don't look like me there, right? Like I would say every time I was the minority, right, in my spaces. So I had to really learn how to like adjust myself sometimes to the community that I was speaking to, but also be grounded. In like my beliefs too and my work. But it was a challenge in corporate America for sure. And I think it's something, hopefully through the Black Squares, like, right, I think it's something like people are realizing like, no, there's diversity within the workplace and we need to understand people's word and take them seriously and give them a voice in this space as well.
Keely, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that from the disabled community's perspective too, or I guess my experience personally, can never speak on behalf of an entire community. But I think from what I've learned and experienced is we can never truly show up to a space if we do not have the accessibility and the actual tools that we need to do that job. Sometimes spaces are physically inaccessible. And this again goes to the power of having friends and community and colleagues that you can truly reach out to and lean on and talk to, because sometimes you need those people to remind you of your rights. You need to know your rights in those spaces, and knowing your rights and acting on those rights will, I think, continue to enable us to show up authentically.
Imani?
Well, yeah, I'll just say with that, like, I thawed out over time. So I came in and I just was like, let me read the room. What is the culture here? What do we do here? I'm gonna work really, really hard. And my hard work, I think, opened up a lot of doors for my voice to be heard, because it was like, oh, she gets it done and she has a point of view. And there seems to be like a series of things that win. And I remember being a coordinator, I had a supervisor at the time, not my dream boss, but an in-between boss, who just like was so narrow-minded. This was right when like the Shade Room was popping off, and I was like, I know, we should put a clip of the Real Housewives of Atlanta on the Shade Room as an exclusive. And she was like, no, we don't do that. We do E! Online and People. And I just remember being like, And I promised myself that when I became vice president, I would listen to the coordinators, I would listen to the people who come in. So sometimes, like, I would give myself these little challenges. And an example of a challenge would be, I'm gonna wear braids to work. And I know that sounds so silly, but when no one else has braids, it feels like this huge deal. And I remember walking in with these like bohemian braids, they were so fly. And for me, it was this little act of rebellion. Like, I'm showing up as myself. And once I wore those braids, I mean, the rest was history. I was like, you can't slow me down. So sometimes it doesn't always look like this huge thing. It could say, you know what? I'm gonna have one update at every single meeting once a week. I'm gonna say something. And I'm gonna exercise using my voice. And next month, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna wear the glitter eyeshadow that I love. So you can give yourself these little challenges, and before you know it, you're showing up as yourself at work.
I love the idea of passing it on to the next generation differently. That's really cool. Okay, we haven't gotten to anybody in the back. Who has a question? All right, it's getting cold in here. Come on. Someone has a question. All right, back here.
Hi, thank you all so much for today. Oh, my voice, hello. So I would say I've been in the workforce a little bit at this point since I graduated, and I'm really curious because I'm sure you've all experienced the disappointment of expected experiences of just being a woman and coming to terms with how you get up the next day and continue to be confident and full of yourself when you meet those challenges with either executives or leadership that essentially kind of represents, I would say, that generational shift of the idea of women in the workplace. I think that's something we all deal with in our 20s, but then as we look through how we continue on and continue to grow and be confident, what would you say, and what, based on your experiences, how do you continue to push through that?
Thank you for that question. We have time for one answer.
For me, I like to look back to help me look forward. And I really like to look back. I'm so inspired by the civil rights movement. I'm so inspired by galvanizing schools of thought and economic power and so much. But I also believe that you can't stay in a place that is draining you. And you'll know what your threshold is. There's a difference between being challenged and being drained. So I was challenged, meaning I was showing up and my boss was like, Imani, we can do better. And she was right. And so I had to stay there, the light was there. Could I have shown up every day for a boss who was like, women don't, I probably couldn't. So I think you have to figure out what's your threshold, and am I being challenged or am I being absolutely drained? And if you're being absolutely drained, you gotta go where the light is. That's what I would say.
Can everyone please give our panelists a round of applause? Keely, Imani, Nana. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.